Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Suzee. I'm an analyst at GSV, and I work in California with Michael Moe and his team, and I'm your moderator today. I'm joined by our 4 panelists who are amazing in their own ways and come from kind of everywhere in the world. And they have great backgrounds and great stories, and they're amazing entrepreneurs. So I'll let them introduce themselves later on, but before that, I want to kind of introduce the purpose of this panel and why are global millennials so interesting. So in general, millennials are born between 1981 and 2000, which means they're probably between 17 to 36 years old right now. More importantly, in the United States, they're the largest generation in the history of the United States, and in the world, there are about 2 billion of them. So they make up almost 1/3 of the global population, which is really crazy when you think about it. In the context of education, the ASU GSV Summit, by 2025, they'll make up 3/4 of the modern workforce. And more importantly, millennials are estimated to have more than 15 jobs their entire lifetimes, which is drastically different than our parents, how they graduated college, and they're in one job and they retired at 65 with their Rolex. So just kind of wrap it all up, these millennials will learn in much different ways that our parents did not learn. So what are companies doing today that are helping millennials learn? How are they learning differently? And more importantly, on a global scale, how does that impact everything in general? So that just kind of puts everything in context. So I wanted to kick off the panel by giving the panelists some time to introduce themselves and talk about what they do. So I'll start down the line with Lucy. So Lucy, you started a consultancy after you graduated college, and then you founded Bridge U after that. So tell me, why did you start by doing that? What made you what was the problem you saw with education, and what have you learned since then?
Yeah, so I started a kind of admissions and education consulting business designed for kind of international or globally minded students and their families. That was sort of my own background, and when I went off to university at Dartmouth in the US from having lived a lot in Europe for most of my life, I found this sort of flurry of families saying we really need support navigating through the complexity of the international sort of higher ed landscape. So in an offline capacity, I built a kind of consulting service around that problem and started sort of scaling that, and in the process of doing so, realized sort of how, well, a few things. First of all, it wasn't an offline, very bespoke service that was being provided to a kind of limited set of the student population, was not hugely scalable. It wasn't really interesting to me, and it wasn't hugely innovative. And then I think I sort of also came to the conclusion that constantly in the consulting business we were working around the school, and really it is our view at Bridge U that the secondary school should own 2 things. It should own learning and learning outcomes and learning processes, but it should also own the responsibility of supporting students as they progress through a set of journeys and helping them plan out and kind of guide that pathway. So what that leads me to is obviously Bridge U, which is using sort of big data and predictive analytics to really kind of predict out appropriate higher education and early career pathways for students. And we position that in the form of a software as a service platform, which we license to secondary schools, who then use the service to actually optimize internally their kind of careers guidance process.
So kind of more on that, you went from Europe and you came to the United States. What were some unexpected challenges you faced, when you were bridging that gap that, people like me wouldn't expect? So I went from Texas to Chicago, which is not that much of a change. So I'm kind of real quickly, what were some challenges you just
Yeah, so it's interesting. I honestly don't think that. I think the challenges are magnified for a student who's looking to kind of cross borders for higher education, insofar as their understanding of the market is you're starting from a lower base, and also typically international students, and we work with international schools in sort of 48 different countries at this stage, are applying to, on average, by our survey data, 2.3 national countries. So that you're not just contending with the complexity of the US higher ed system, you're also thinking about maybe you're applying to Hong Kong, and you're also applying to universities in Australia. So there's actually kind of there's information problems which are magnified for international students, and then there's the workflow barriers. And I think that's a problem, that's a real issue domestically in the US, is actually the sort of fragmented nature of literally submitting successful applications is actually kind of a real pain, whether you are a foreign student or a domestic student.
Wow. So Pierre, you founded OpenClassrooms, and now it's Europe and Africa's largest MOOC. Tell us about your journey. I mean, what made you want to start the company? What have you learned since then?
Yep. So we started really early when we were 6th graders with my partner, Mathieu, in 1999, and we built online courses the way we wanted to have them at school, basically. We've been doing so as a hobby for over 10 years, and 3 years and a half ago, we founded OpenClassrooms. That is an online learning provider in Europe and in Africa. So we train 3 million people every month on digital skills, on tomorrow's jobs, tomorrow's skills. And the unique characteristic that we have is we managed to have a fully accreditation. We are a higher education institution, and we have the degree awarding power. That means that we deliver bachelor's degrees and master's degrees fully online in a very modern fashion. You can start whenever you want, all year round. You have an individual mentor via video conference helping you out throughout the curriculum. And we do that in many countries. We have students in over 128 countries. And I think right now our main focus, so basically the mission of OpenClassrooms is to make education more accessible. That was the original spirit of this project. And right now we are really focused on employability. That means we want to bring students the skills they need to get a job or to create their own job. And we added the strong commitment, a job guarantee to every single of our degrees. That means that if you graduate on OpenClassrooms, we guarantee that you're going to get a job 6 months after your degree. And we're going to provide you individual career services, partnerships with employers, and other resources. And if we don't deliver, your tuition fees will be fully refunded. So this is what, the biggest commitment you can take, and it has changed the project quite largely because we want to focus on high demand jobs, high demand curricula only, and we have to focus not only on bringing skills and a degree to our students, but on bringing them jobs.
That's awesome. So, Rodrigo, you wrote the first business plan for your company when you were 17.
Yes.
What has, so now you're obviously not 17. What has changed since
I'm
then?
19 now.
I was going to say 18, but it's fine. So
I'm
what
27, yeah.
what has changed since then? What have you learned? And, what made you want to start your business when you were 17?
Yeah, so, a lot has changed, but the vision, a very simple vision still maintained. So, back then in 2007, when we decided to build Passei Direto, we had this vision that, okay, there was the social network Facebook, there was the professional network LinkedIn. Let's build the academic network. Let's build someplace in the internet, a platform where people can go to study. So, this hasn't changed since then. The product has changed a lot. The user base has changed. We're close to reaching 9 million users, and we're focused in Brazil. And it's basically 9 million millennials, right, since we're focused on the college market. And we've been seeing a lot of traffic growing from other countries as well. Users that are not in Brazil. Last year was around 5 million visits coming from other countries. This year we should surpass that. But we've seen a lot of changes and growth, and really trying to provide the best academic outcomes for our dear millennials.
So, Paul, your background is a little bit more different in that you were a former consultant, and then you worked for GM, and then you launched Virgin Hotels with Richard Branson's Virgin Group, and then you founded Voxy. So tell us about your journey through your career, and what made you really want to start your company after all of that.
Well, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think that's why I was drawn to work at Virgin, and then you start working there and you realize that being an entrepreneur like Richard's much cooler than working for an entrepreneur. So I always wanted to start something, and a couple of the things that I learned while I was there was that you should attack really big markets and you should do something you're passionate about. And earlier in my career, when I was like 22, I didn't do anything when I was 17. That's incredible. when I was 22, I moved to Chile without speaking a word of Spanish, and I ended up learning really quickly to speak fluent Spanish, and I still do. And I learned working in an automotive parts warehouse, where I was just unloading sea containers full of car parts and putting them on pickup trucks and selling them to car dealers. And I did that with an Ivy League degree for 13 months, but I learned Spanish really quickly. And I learned to talk about car parts. So Voxy, which I started about many years ago now, 7 years ago, is based on sort of that single anecdote, which I've subsequently managed to back up with a ton of research. But personalization is really the key to effectively teaching English and to effectively teaching people to communicate and collaborate across different cultures. And by technology today, with lots of different things like mobile devices and AI, et cetera, you can create really personalized learning pathways that can teach much more effective English to people around the world.
So globalization is a huge megatrend now, especially by the fact that with the fact that the digital tracks have been created over the past 20 years. So now there are over, I think, 3.7 billion people on the internet and 2.5 billion smartphones. So everyone's connected in a way that's really unexpected. And now you have companies like Airbnb and Spotify and Uber being born with a global mission as opposed to one market. So Rodrigo, Brazil is really special because Brazilians are the people that spend the most number of waking hours on the internet.
Yeah.
And also there's been a huge surge by the Brazilian government on education and focusing on that. So how have you capitalized on that while you're building this global company?
Sure. So Brazil, like you said, we have the highest ratio of internet users to social network users in the world. And we have a very collaborative culture. So on top of that, we've been able to build a platform in which students study together. They share study material, and they're really focused on being successful together and helping each other. And in terms of the changes in the Brazilian education, lots of people were going to college, but basically that didn't mean much because many of them weren't attending college or weren't ready to go to college. So as soon as they went to college, they dropped out. And so we've been focusing, we're in the college market, but we've been focusing a lot to guarantee that those guys in the first semester have the study materials, have the confidence many times that they don't have in order to succeed the first semester, which is the biggest dropout rate, and then consequently finish college.
So how will you evolve your company so that it becomes truly global? So what are your plans to build it out from not only South America but everywhere around the world, in the way kind of Facebook did?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we made a big decision. We were getting lots of scale in Brazil in terms of users, and we saw two options. Or we kept in Brazil and got a solid business model and then scaled to other countries, or we began scaling a lot to other countries without a business model. We decided to have a business model. So basically, Passei Direto began as a peer-to-peer study platform, and then we built a freemium model on top of it, a premium account in which students pay. So we're getting pretty mature in the Brazilian college market, and as soon as we have the necessary, let's say, capital to go to other countries, we're definitely going to chase that because we have a really high growth. We're talking about 9 million users, and all of them come for zero marketing, all organic viral growth. So we understand our capabilities of growing, and we definitely want to explore that on the right time.
Awesome. So Lucy, in the past decade, the number of international students has doubled, and it will double again the next decade. Why is there such an increased demand for international study? And what are your thoughts on that? Yeah,
I think it's sort of a natural consequence of what we think of as the massification of higher education. So in 1970, you have 30 million people enrolled in higher education. Now you have 160 million. That's due to be 260 million in 10 years. So higher education and sort of credentialing yourself in that post-secondary capacity used to be reserved as a right for the privileged few, and that's not the case anymore. And then you sort of add to that the kind of growth rates of some of the emerging markets, China, India, Brazil being kind of the obvious three, and the fact that you have these very, very large and sort of populous middle classes now, and those those middle classes have students who are, you know, hugely aspirational as well. And I think what's quite interesting, and China's kind of an obvious example of this, is with, you know, as a country with 300-400 million people in the effective middle class, and a couple hundred universities. So there's a genuine supply and demand problem in a lot of these countries, which means that students are kind of needing to cross borders, in fact, to pursue quality higher education. And you know, certainly that doesn't necessarily mean hop on a plane and go study at, you know, Stanford. More often than not, in fact, that means staying actually locally within continent, but pursuing, you know, opportunities outside your home country. So I think it's come about through a series of different sort of demographic trends.
So personally, why do you think international study is important? So why did you choose to come to the United States as opposed to stay, you know, in Europe or go anywhere else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with the sort of the concept that we actually do not economically, you know, socially, digitally live in a world which is divided by borders anymore, and nor should we. And you know, GSV is very, very fond of that slogan. What is it? Talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not, right? Mm-hmm. And that, you know, that is, you know, we really kind of stick to that philosophy within our business. You know, why shouldn't, you know, a child in Surabaya, Indonesia, at one of our local schools there, be able to then study at the top university in Hong Kong and get a degree in engineering? You know, I think it's a fantastic thing to be able to kind of cross borders to pursue opportunities. And I'm also just a big believer generally in kind of adopting a kind of global mindset. And I think it helps you really to adapt, to understand different cultures and to be able to blend and evolve and adapt and potentially even work in other cultures. And I think that's an increasingly sort of powerful skill set for the kind of workforce of tomorrow.
So going right off of that, blending cultures, that also means blending languages. So why has there been a surge in, you know, language learning? Why do people want to learn English? Why do people want to learn Chinese? I mean, what are your thoughts on that as you're building out your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think about that problem literally all day, every day. And I think that to solve the really daunting problems that our planet is facing, from, you know, poverty to global warming, we need to be able to collaborate. And the smartest people in the world, I mean, it's true, right? Talent is and intelligence is not even, or is evenly distributed. We need a common language to be able to collaborate and solve these problems. And I think English is actually that. I think English is the language of problem solving. And there's other examples of universal languages, right? Like music. I think the best music in the world is because everybody in the world, if you're in Hungary or, you know, New York, you're reading sheet music the same, right? And that's music's common language. Math, right? Same, common language. I think we need, you know, a verbal language that's something more sophisticated than emoji to communicate and collaborate with each other. And I don't think, by the way, I don't think that's like an imperialistic view where like English is going to conquer other languages. That's like quite the contrary. Everybody will fall in love in their native language, and they're going to learn about relationships, and they're going to learn, you know, how to be a human being in their native language. But when it comes to, you know, accessing jobs and educational programs and working with each other, it'll be English.
So OpenClassroom's largest move in Europe and Africa. What are the differences that you've noticed between, you know, learning in those two continents? And also, you know, what everyone thinks about Africa, you know, leapfrogging PC technology, going straight to mobile. So what are your observations on that, Pierre, as you're, you know, building out your company?
Mm-hmm. So we deliver our degrees in English, French, and Spanish right now. So we have people literally all over the globe. And the main issues we face right now are that job markets are still very local, and the accreditation processes and the accreditation bodies are also very local. So the education system is a local system. So you go to university in Utah that is fully accredited by the Utah state, and you land an American degree, and then you'll find a job somewhere, probably in Utah or in the US. But right now, for instance, we've got the student from Burma living in Japan and enrolled in an English curriculum leading to a French degree. So this is like globalization of the education system right now. And we need to find ways to have equivalences between degrees. So what do I do with a bachelor's degree from the US, and if I go to Japan, can I apply for a master's degree, or can I find a good job with my bachelor's degree? And how did that work, like bilaterally in every single country? But that's a very tough issue. So right now, we have this fantastic thing called Europe, and we have equivalences in Europe, like in over 60 countries right now. So if you have a degree in Spain, you can be employed in Germany, and there's no issue behind that. So one problem, the accreditation in degrees, recognition of degrees. The other one is the job market. So, for instance, a web developer in France is different from a web developer in the US. There are not the same skills behind the very same job title. And you have to understand that to create the curriculum that employers need. And that is very specific. So we know that the trend is job markets are in some way merging and being standardized, globalized, and especially in tech and on digital jobs, but in other sectors it can take many more years. So this is a huge struggle that we have to scale, but at the same time to be very local and well adapted to every job market.
So millennials get kind of a lot of comments from other people and being we're very socially driven. We're driven by social good. We want to change the world. We want to change people's lives. Actually, if you look at it, I think 50% of millennials choose to buy a product based on the fact that they feel good buying it. So probably I'll go down the line, starting with you, Paul. What are your thoughts on this new millennial mindset, and how are you applying that as you're building out your company and your brand in education?
Well, I think millennials are, first of all, daunting, just the sheer number, like the magnitude of the people that we're going to be dealing with is incredible. It's also a really broad range. The young from 17 to 36 is what you said, right?
Yep.
17-year-olds were born digitally native. 36-year-olds remember phones before they were smart.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also a pretty, diverse group in that regard. But what I think about it, I think even more so than the generation that's following them, which is very entrepreneurial, right? Generation Z. I think millennials are just very different. That's sort of social mindedness before career and before the things is quite different than the previous generation, right? Mm-hmm. They were raised by baby boomers who were super enthusiastic and the world was their oyster, whereas that's not how the previous generation grew up or the next generation grew up. So when you ask specifically what, we think about it, most of our learners are actually college-age students in Brazil, actually. That's our largest market. So we think about it in terms of the content and curriculum we put together and deliver. We think about it in terms of, you have to be, you almost have to abstract your product's features and functionalities away from device type and make sure that you're meeting them everywhere they want to be. That's sort of an imperative, I think. Having a good vision and a good mission, a good mission is really critical. It's the products and services they're going to buy, and it's the companies they're going to choose to work for.
So Rodrigo, how are you building out your brand?
Yeah, so before I talk about that, we've done research with our user base, and we saw that 35% of them consider getting money something critical for their lives. I did this research last year, but I bet you if we did 10 years ago, it'd be much higher than 35%. So we're seeing the millennials going for companies, to work at companies or to starting companies that have a mission, a purpose behind them. Some time ago, I saw many companies that didn't have a purpose, just a mission and vision statements. Now, the corporate culture and social responsibility, users are actually, they want to see that. They want to understand how your company actually helps society, and they're very demanding. So internally, we have several issues. There are some things that we could do in a freemium model that we could take more of the free part and put them more to the Miam side. But it might harm your reputation, I mean, and they're very demanding on that. So, I mean, it's been a very interesting trade-off to see how do I monetize my user base, but also like how do I make them really engage with my brand and loving it and not feeling like we're just trying to limit stuff, you know, and get money out of them, you know.
So Pierre, what do you think? When you started your company, did you ever expect to think that you need to build a high-impact brand?
Yeah, it's totally true. I think both on the consumer side, but also on the talent side, employee side. So we did something interesting in terms of culture and hiring process at OpenClassrooms. We built a course on OpenClassrooms called How Do We Work at OpenClassrooms? So it's basically a MOOC on our internet culture. And you can take it for free. It's all public. And it explains our mission, our vision, our business model, our product, our teams, how you can get paid leaves, how you can buy something, all social events, everything that makes OpenClassrooms unique, all explained in a course. And when we hire somebody in the very first meetings, you'll have a link to this course, and you'll have to study this course to better understand first our product, because it's a course on OpenClassrooms, but also to better understand the culture. And I think it's a two-way street. It means also you have a full transparency on how the company works and how it fits or doesn't fit your own character or your personal goal. And we expect that at the end of the hiring process, you completed that course and you are fully engaged in coming to OpenClassrooms. It was built as an inboarding course, but right now it's also a great tool to recruit new employees. So I think most of our employees came for our mission because they realized that we are a mission-driven company. It also means that we have, for instance, a double bottom line P&L, financials on one side, but social impact on the other side. So we tracked how many people we have enrolled, how many people we graduated, how many people we reskilled and were job seekers. We trained them, and they found a job thanks to us. And we had like several major partnerships with public employment services in several countries. We gave away trainings to those in need, job seekers. We trained 40,000 job seekers for free. That was 12 million euros in services. And we've done that because of our mission, that is to make education more accessible. And the good thing and the amazing conclusion of that, we gave it away with no second thought. We didn't think we would make any money out of it. But finally, after a year or two, it created such good marketing, and that governments started to buy us degrees and curriculum for their own needs. And it drove huge sales, basically, to the companies because of the mission.
So I'll ask more about talent development later, but before that, Lucy, what are your thoughts on this impact-driven society now?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what's been said. I think actually, for a lot of us as founders up here, I think you are thinking about millennials in two ways. I mean, certainly as in our case, the end consumer of our product, but then also very much as who you're trying to attract and retain as talent. And there are two different sets of challenges. I think on the student side, so our purchaser, our client is effectively the secondary school, and the users are faculty within the school, and also the students who are really kind of consuming and spending most of the time, utilizing the tools within BridgeU. And I think, what's difficult is I think there obviously is something to be said for how millennials are different, but a lot of our research actually reinforces the fact that they are, and this is taken from a kind of very large global sample, admittedly, but they are also driven by the same goals and the outcomes, because the same goals, and they have very similar aspirations to the generation before us. So I'll kind of give an example. We within our platform, we're just launching, basically because we were sort of hounded by the students, we're launching a kind of adaptive careers planner, and we partnered with Burning Glass to create a sort of matrix whereby students who are recommended courses in universities and degrees we can contextualize the kind of labor market implications of that degree within a 3, 4, 5 year time horizon. And that genuinely came about because we had 50,000 kids on our site saying, why do you not have this? I need to plan my job. I need to plan my career. And so I think they, at least from the global sample that is represented on our platform, I think there are still a lot of the same, very practical urges of, I know I need to get to this point, and how can I kind of work back from there? I think what sort of has happened, and this is, I think, why we tend to think of millennials as a sort of slightly different breed, is that actually the labor markets have completely shifted and transformed, and what used to be quote unquote secure as a role and as a career is just not. So if you don't have that security anymore and you're 15, 16, 17, you're by default in a marketplace which encourages you to think in a slightly more non-traditional way. So it's my view that millennials actually operate quite similarly to generations ahead of them, but that a lot of the conditions that are surrounding them are radically different.
Got it. So kind of going back to talent development, 40% of millennials would rather take a lower salary and have the ability to fire their boss, which is a pretty funny stat. But as CEOs and founders and leaders of your companies, how does that make you feel? And how do you develop your talent so that they don't fire you eventually? So maybe I'll start with you, Lucy, and I'll go down the line.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think the other thing I would say is I do think a lot of companies represented at this conference, and certainly I know the case for most of us sitting on this stage, the added complication of also being a founder of a tech company is also how you choose to raise capital. And if you are doing rounds of financing, you're actually growing, because that's the model that you chose and it's the model that your investors are expecting of you. You're growing at an unnatural pace. And I think that creates really unnatural demands on already very, very talented members of your team. And it's certainly something we struggle with a lot. We've gone from 6 people to 36 people in 18 months. And we're hoping to kind of do a similar sort of growth trajectory over the coming 18 months. And I think it's a real challenge. And I think what's kind of interesting as ed tech companies, I think we do have a slightly unique opportunity to take the learnings, as you were saying, from some of our own products and services, and actually try and feed that back into the upskilling of our own team members. And so I think that that certainly is something that I think can be utilized as a creative way of saying, we exist in this ed tech landscape, we see these innovations going on, let's feed them back into our own internal processes. And then I think the other thing is just, and I see this sort of working very well within the context of my company, is I think, and actually Paul and I were talking about this sort of last night, I think, when it comes to hiring, it's very, very difficult, certainly at the pace at which, a lot of us are moving our businesses, to hire for a specific set of skills, because in 9 months, that individual in that role will need to have been reinvented. Mm-hmm. So I think in our experience at least, it's been much better to sort of treat that, to borrow your phrase, Paul, as a kind of a lump of clay that is a very talented, smart lump of clay that can be kind of chipped away at and molded as the needs of the business change and evolve. But I do think it's extremely hard to do well.
When I joined GSV, I got called a blob. So being called a lump of clay is more attractive than being called a blob. But I digress. So Pierre, you talked about how you develop your talents. So I'll skip you for this one. But Rodrigo, how are you developing talent at your company?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So I think there's something important is to build a trust culture and to say that failing is okay and to even let founders fail and to be transparent about it. So you can tell your team, okay, I failed and I did that and it was wrong and we spent that budget into something that was useless, but it happens. It's fine, and you can give that as an example to your team to behave the same way. So this is something that needs to be really nurtured, I'd say. You have to do it every month, every 2 months, every six months to make sure that it doesn't go away. As you bringing like 50 more people, those people won't have that training. They might have it, but you're not sure about it. So you need to do it on a very regular basis.
So 2 quick points. First is a bit more than 2 years ago, we had done the company's mission, vision, and values. And basically, we saw that we needed to redo them or update most of them in a bit less than 2 years. I mean, that may sound kind of crazy, but as Lucy said, the things change in such a fast pace that your team changes, and basically you have to update the culture of your company, like if you're in a very fast-growing mode, or else you're going to stay in an old culture. There's a point where, I mean, you try to maintain it, but truth is, if the company changed so much as our company did, you have to try to update it, or else you're going to have like it's not going to be working. And the second point is that we did a cultural diagnostics of the business. And the number one issue that pointed out was that the team felt like they needed more challenges. And most of them were like analysts. So, I mean, these guys, ready or not for the challenge, they want to be challenged, and that's what really drives these guys.
That's really interesting. So why did you what changed between the 2 cultures? I mean, what did you notice that was not working that made you want to do such a drastic change?
So, Passei Direto in the beginning, we were a free collaborative file sharing, let's say, study platform, and now we became a study platform. I mean, much like, basically we didn't charge anything on the users, and it was really focused on the community, and now we're building our own tools to help the students. So, I mean, that is a very big change in strategy and in the product, and due to the pace that we were able to grow, we hired very different type of people. Like in the beginning, we were basically 80-something% of the team was technology, and now it's around 50%. So I mean, it's changed a lot.
What about you, Paul? How are you developing your talent?
So actually build on something Pierre said. I think that's amazing that you have like your onboarding course publicly available for recruits. Because I think transparency is the most important thing for millennials, at least in my experience. I think all of us we sort of punch above our weight on mission. Like all of our companies feel good to work for, right? We're helping people learn. That's a hell of a lot better than building ad tech, which is like what I'm competing with in New York. It's like, do you want to go make people click on advertising or come teach? And almost everybody says teach. But that wasn't enough. I found out like we do a pretty good job of like surveying and soliciting input from our team, which is about 65 people right now. And over the years, we keep, like I said, good longitudinal data, but we were consistently hearing that we were not transparent enough. And it started to get almost laughable to me, because at all hands and at our like weekly business and beers, we would be so transparent, sharing every single success, every single failure, but it was like never enough. So I sort of started to look around the room, and it was like there's this insatiable need to feel like they are in the know. And we now do, like, we telegraph what the experience is going to be like to a new hire, like long before we start asking them to do anything. And I actually would love to take it a step further and do it to recruits. The other thing about millennials that's actually awesome, and it's sort of my lump of clay thing, is they have so much learning agility. Like they are able to learn Marketo or Salesforce or a new optimization to whatever so much faster than the previous generation. They just sort of like grok how to use new tools. And as a result, they do want more challenges. And what we've done recently is actually put like a mentoring model in place. It seems like a little bit overbuilt for a company of 60 people, but it actually helped because you're able to sort of identify. Like, they don't want to talk about like performance reviews and like career paths because it's never going to be fast enough for them. Like, if you have a 5-year career path, they just like roll their eyes at you. They want to know like how can they advance and be promoted in the next like 3 weeks. But like mentorship sort of helps with that.
So you probably worked for some amazing people throughout your career. So I mean, what have you learned from your former experiences that helps you build a healthier or a great culture at your company?
It's funny. My team is so sick of hearing me talk about that. We just did this big sales boot camp where I'm trying to train 10 people on like how to communicate our product value proposition and how the company works. And I worked at Booz Allen Hamilton, which used to be a good consulting firm. I don't know if it counts anymore as that, but and I got incredible training, right? Incredible training. I think it was like $100,000 per employee is what they spent on training. Virgin, same thing, like just this incredible training. And basically what I learned is that neither of those experiences served me very well because I have way too high of a bar for what good training is. So I thought ours was like shit, mostly because we didn't spend $100,000 per new hire. We spent like $20. And the other thing is
T-shirt and pen,
yeah,
and
like
a cup.
T-shirt and pen and some PowerPoint as opposed to flying in famous speakers and stuff like that. But it sort of did set at least it set a very high bar for what I consider to be a good culture and good education and good progression.
So we probably have like 8 minutes left of the panel, so I want to wrap it up, kind of talk about the next generation. So Generation Z, born 2000 probably 20 to now, drastically different than the millennials. They're true digital natives that were born, when smartphones were, they're 5 and they have smartphones and iPads. So how are you thinking about the next generation as you're building your company? Have you started thinking about it yet? And what are some huge challenges you foresee that that you're proactively doing right now? So I'll start with you, Rodrigo.
So I think this generation already, and the next one will be even more. I think they unconsciously do an ROI calculation all the time. It seems that they want to give the last they can to the company and get the most out of it, So they want to spend less, they want to have the fastest service ever, and they want to have an amazing product that will solve their needs and also help society.
They all have like side hustle. They all have side jobs.
Yeah.
Like moonlighting is what it used to be called a decade ago, and now
exactly.
they all have like little hustle projects on the side.
So I think companies, either internally or to your customers, you got to be obsessed about having the best ROI you can to those guys.
So how are you going to build the best ROI for your customers?
For the customers, making the price point as lowest as we can, making the product, solving their problem the quicker we can, due to recommendations, AI, great material, categorization, and basically making sure we solve their problems, even if we need to add more services. And as an education company, being able to benefit and impact society beyond our core business, which I believe is something we and many other companies are striving for.
So Lucy, you're in that high school to college divide. People are getting younger and graduating high school now. So how are you thinking about the next generation?
Yeah, if anything, we sort of barely touch the millennial generation, to be honest, because most of the students on our platform are 14, and the sort of tail end of them are 17 now. And of course, we renew our contracts with the schools, so they're just going to get younger. They're going to get further away from the millennial category. And I think it's interesting. I think the way it impacts us the most is actually through product design and user experience. And really, this is a generation of kids who have taken Facebook UX for granted, right? And that's a company that thousands of people have spent 10 years building and refining. And so I think it's really, and we get this really interesting juxtaposition, I would say, from a product design perspective, because our users are both teachers within schools that tend to be just wowed by a sort of very basic new addition to the menu bar, and then these kids who have who want to navigate everything and have a sort of patience threshold, which is like half a second before then like the other shit doesn't work, you know. And so I think that's, you know, that's an interesting experience, I think, for our designers in particular to have, because they see sort of how different the user experience is there. But I think the reality is the bar is just higher, and you know, and the sort of flip side of that and the benefit of that is that, you know, I think it continually can sort of push your own talent internally to try and kind of innovate and get closer to this sort of very high standard of what's ultimately going to engage, you know, that demographic of teenagers.
So you talked about user experience as like a core functionality that your product must have. What are some more that you foresee that, you know, 14-year-olds are expecting that, you know, is just as daunting as taking Facebook UX for granted?
Do you mean, what do you mean by that?
I mean, like, you know, so user experience is a core,
Yeah.
is a core functionality that you need to have in your product. What are some others? So basically the question is like, you know, how are you designing a product for 14-year-olds? Like what is the product for 14-year-olds or even younger?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, and we're kind of constantly trying to do testing to kind of get at the root of what that is. And I think, you know, I mean, obviously having like a pretty, I mean, so because we operate across so many markets, one of the challenges there is, you know, you be doing something on an internet in like Ningbo, and it'll time out, right, because of the firewall and sort of where our servers are located, and, you know, things like that. The actual kind of infrastructure of your product really, I think, does matter if you're catering to kind of quite a large, sort of geographically very diverse group of very young people, for exactly the reason that I think the patience threshold is a lot lower. You know, I think the other thing, which I think it does serve us very well, is that they are used to, you know, we always joke with our teachers that actually most of the kids in our schools are not, they're 14, 15, they're not allowed phones. And we joke that we see this, like, you know, spike in usage, like, between classes. The kids are coming out of class and, like, flipping on Bridgeu and, like, shortlisting, you know, courses and that kind of thing. And I think it is, you know, that we can, as founders of those companies targeting those demographics of students, we can leverage that, right? If you make it engaging and you make it sort of addictive and people want to come back and actually kind of can continually gain value from that product or service, you know, they're so used to just jumping back on the phone, right, or jumping back on the computer. So I think there's challenges baked into that, but then there's opportunities as well.
So Pierre, real quickly, how are you thinking about the next generation?
I think there are three main keys when you want to build a product for Generation Z. One is transparency. So we already talked about it. You need to build a product without any commitment, no bullshit, I mean, no strong marketing, just let it grow organically, like you said. So real Netflix style, so no commitment, low point of engagement, maybe a freemium model. The second point I'd say is on the flexibility. So it means everything has to be very modular. You can start learning, stop, pause, then come back 6 months later on another device. You can just have a chunk of learning and then get a reward out of it. So gamification also behind that is very, very important. Like the attention span is very low, and at the end of the span, you get a reward. So you need to build such a strong UX to bring that. And the last thing I would mention is to align your business model with their goals. So in our case, their goals are to get a job. So we need to align our business model with that and say, you're going to get it, or we fail and you don't pay. So you have to think about that and to make it clear what their goals are and how you and your product will help achieve those goals.
So Paul, any famous last words?
Well, I'll just say the flexibility. Like, these are kids who grew up like thinking that you designed Nikes yourself. Like, I bought Air Jordans that were like off the shelf, and they want nothing off the shelf, so it has to be bespoke and configurable and like just custom built for them. And then I think a lot about like they grew up talking to computers and like, I don't know if you've seen these conversational UI which is like a new way to build an app. Like I could never do UI or UX anymore because it's like moved past me. Like they want to be able to just like stream of consciousness, talk to technology, and get what they want, and whether that's talking, you know, verbally or writing, but like yeah, chatbots and like the Alexa type stuff is, I think, what like the new expectation is. Like it's like no, there's like shouldn't be an interface. Like the new interface is no interface.
So truly like on-demand, personalized.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Round of applause for our panelists who are amazing and so intelligent. And yeah, thank you.